Most Valuable Susan B. Anthony Dollar Coins. Welcome to Numismatic Vault Extra. Today, we're exploring the top 5 most valuable Susan B. Anthony $1 coins from the United States of America, United States. In this video, we'll take a close look at their current market values, highlight important era coins, and explain the specific conditions that make certain Susan B. Anthony dollars truly rare, including silver-like finishes, unique color shades, and other special characteristics that have made these coins major players in the collector and investor world. These rare treasures aren't just pieces of history. They're some of the most valuable coins collectors are actively searching for today. So, if you're a coin enthusiast, an investor, or someone who appreciates the beauty and significance of American currency, backhand index pointing right, this video is for you. Let's get started with the first coin. Magnifying glass tilted left money bag. The story of the 1979 P. Susan B. Anthony dollar begins in a period of quiet expectation, a time when America was navigating social change, technological advances, and a growing curiosity about its own identity. In the autumn of 1979, this small, golden-toned coin was released into circulation not with fanfare or dramatic announcement, but with the simple purpose of easing everyday transactions. No one could have predicted that, decades later, some of these unassuming coins would be revered and hunted like buried treasure, whispered about in collector circles with awe and fascination. When the first Susan B. Anthony dollars rolled off the presses at the Philadelphia Mint, they were unlike any U.S. coin in everyday use. Smaller than the Eisenhower dollar that preceded them but still larger than a quarter, they had an unfamiliar feel in the hand. Their color, a soft golden hue, set them apart from the copper and silver coins that Americans were used to passing back and forth in daily life. Yet even with their distinct look, most people barely noticed them at first, treating them as just another piece of change. On the obverse of the coin stands the determined, calm, and eloquent face of Susan B. Anthony, a woman whose life was defined by tireless advocacy for equality, justice, and the right to be heard. She was not a distant figure from a polished page of history, but a real human whose courage and tenacity helped reshape the nation's understanding of who deserved a voice. To place her on U.S. currency was to acknowledge a legacy that had long stood in the margins, finally brought into the mainstream view of American identity. The P mint mark on the coin tells us it was struck in Philadelphia, the oldest mint in the United States, a place whose presses have clanged in words since the earliest days of the Republic. Philadelphia has been the birthplace of coins that traveled through every corner of the nation, and the 1979 P. Anthony dollar was no exception. Millions were made there with the expectation they would be used and spent, not studied or stored away. Yet life had other plans for many of these coins. The United States in 1979 was a society increasingly dependent on paper currency and credit cards, and coins like the dollar simply weren't embraced by the public. The Susan B. Anthony's size and color, although distinctive, led many to confuse it with other denominations or overlook it entirely. As a result, many of these coins were never widely circulated. They were stacked, stored, and left in bank vaults, forgotten for years. Out of that sea of millions, a tiny fraction emerged as survivors, coins that escaped the wear and tear of everyday life. Most coins show the gentle erosion of decades of use. Edges smoothed, details softened, surfaces bearing the light scratches of hands and pockets. But rare survivors, untouched by circulation, retain an almost miraculous brilliance. These coins still carry the look of the moment they were struck, as if time itself hesitated before leaving its mark. Collectors call these pristine, untouched specimens mint state, coins that show no evidence of everyday handling. To hold one under a bright light is to witness a flash of history reborn. Sharp letters, vivid details, and surfaces that glow with a warmth that seems impossible for a coin more than 4 decades old. These rare survivors captivate because they defy the ordinary. They invite the imagination to wander back to the moment they first left the mint, crisp and new. But rarity is only part of what makes these coins compelling. There's an emotional current that runs through the Susan B. Anthony dollar, a connection between the woman immortalized on the coin and the story of the coin itself. Anthony was a pioneer who stood firm in her convictions long before the world fully recognized her worth. In a poetic twist, many of these coins were similarly unrecognized in their own time, overlooked and underappreciated, only to be rediscovered and admired by later generations. Within collector communities, stories circulate of extraordinary examples discovered in the most unexpected places. A box of old change passed down through family generations, a coin album found at the bottom of a forgotten drawer, a handful of pocket change unearthed in a dusty attic. The thrill of those discoveries, the instant when someone realizes that what they thought was ordinary is actually something remarkable, is the heartbeat of numismatic passion. And in the realm of rare coins, condition is everything. A Susan B. Anthony dollar that escaped circulation can command significantly more interest than one worn smooth by years of use. A brilliant example is not just a coin, it is a snapshot of time, preserved and radiant, that bridges past and present. It becomes a touchstone for history, storytelling, and imagination. Collectors also look for subtle variations, tiny differences in striking quality, surface details, or die marks that are invisible to the casual eye but like fingerprints to a trained collector. These variations can add layers of fascination and value, turning a coin that was once cast aside into a sought-after specialty piece. In these minute details, enthusiasts see both craftsmanship and chance woven together. Even though the 1979 P. Anthony dollars are not composed of silver, the emotional resonance of what they represent and the rarity of the finest survivors give them a kind of priceless quality. They remind us that value does not always live in precious metals alone, but in stories, in survival, and in the arc of history bending toward recognition of the overlooked. Over time, as years turned into decades, interest in these coins grew, not because they were flashy, but because they were meaningful. The Susan B. Anthony dollar became a conversation piece, a collector's item, and for some, a dream of discovery. The idea that one might stumble upon an exceptional example, one that defied the abrasion of time, sparked imagination and excitement across collector circles. And while the notion that a single coin could make someone a billionaire overnight is more fantasy than reality, the idea of profound transformation lies at the heart of why we collect at all. Collectors know that value is not only monetary, it is emotional, historical, and deeply personal. The thrill of finding something rare, the joy of understanding context and story, and the connection between past and present all combine to create meaning far beyond face value. In the end, the 1979 P. Susan B. Anthony dollar is more than just a coin. It is a testament to the persistence of a pioneering spirit, a reminder that recognition sometimes comes long after creation, and a symbol of the unexpected value that can live in the everyday objects we overlook. It teaches us that history lives in small things, in the quiet details of metal and memory. For the fortunate soul who discovers an exceptional example today, a coin that still shines with the brilliance of time untouched, it is not just an artifact of the past. It is a reminder that value often hides where we least expect it, waiting for someone to look closely enough, imagine deeply enough, and care enough to see what others pass by. In that discovery lies the timeless joy of connection, curiosity, and wonder. Next coin. The story of the 1980 D. Susan B. Anthony dollar is not a tale of precious metal or royal treasure, but something even more human, a coin born into the everyday rhythms of American life, carrying within its humble metal the echoes of change, progress, and quiet determination. When this coin first rolled out of the Denver Mint presses, most people didn't treat it as something special. It was simply a dollar, the same denomination as paper money, but in a small, hard disc that fit easily into the palm of a hand. From the moment it was introduced, the Susan B. Anthony dollar stood apart. Its size was smaller than previous dollar coins, its color a muted metallic tone that made it easy to confuse with quarters or other spare change. But for those who looked closely, it bore a face unprecedented in U.S. circulation. The portrait of Susan B. Anthony, a woman whose unrelenting fight for equality reshaped the nation's conscience. To place her image on a circulating coin was at once fitting and revolutionary, a reminder that history is not only made in capitals and courts, but in tireless effort and unyielding belief. The D Mint mark on the 1980 coin tells us it was struck at the Denver Mint, a facility that had long been one of the workhorses of American coinage. In 1980 alone, millions of these dollars were produced, destined to circulate throughout supermarkets, transit machines, and lunch counters across the country. Most of them entered pockets and purses with little fanfare, used in the everyday commerce of life, paying for snacks, tipping street performers, feeding meters, or simply jangling in change cups. Yet from the very beginning, the Anthony dollar was misunderstood. Its size and design made it easy to mistake for other coins. Vending machines balked. Cashiers hesitated. People often ignored it, or spent it without a glance. And so, while millions were struck, many did not circulate widely. Some piled up in bank vaults, others in Federal Reserve holdings, and still others were quietly scooped up by collectors sensing that something overlooked might one day be appreciated. Most 1980 D. Anthony dollars lived ordinary lives. They were handled, rubbed, dropped, and forgotten in cup holders and drawers. Those coins show the gentle wear of decades. Surfaces smoothed, detail softened, the sharp imprint of Anthony's determined gaze dulled by the friction of everyday use. These circulated examples tell stories of thousands of ordinary transactions, a whisper of lives lived and days past. But history also loves exceptions. Among the millions of 1980 dollars, a rare few survived in remarkable condition, untouched, uncirculated, and brimming with original luster that seems almost impossible after more than 40 years. To a collector's eye, these pristine survivors are breathtaking. They gleam like fragments of time that escaped history's friction, preserving the moment of their creation with extraordinary clarity. Imagine, if you will, lifting such a coin under a bright light. Its surfaces catch the glow of careful preservation, the fine lines of Anthony's portrait still crisp, her expression undimmed by decades of change. The lettering, the stars, the eagle on the reverse, all stand with the sharp definition of a coin fresh from the mint. These are not just coins. They are time capsules. Collectors call these mint-state coins, pieces that show little or no wear from circulation. They are rare not because they were struck in tiny numbers, but because so few coins avoid the wear of daily handling over decades. When you find a mint-state 1980 D. Anthony dollar, you are looking at a survivor, a coin that, by chance or care, was sidestepped by the wear that claimed its sisters. Beyond condition, there is the thrill of nuance. In any large mintage, slight differences arise. Minute variations in striking pressure, subtle abnormalities in the metal flow, tiny marks that may hint at unique qualities. To the casual eye, these seem insignificant. But to a collector, they are the sparks that separate the common from the remarkable. A small deviation, barely detectable, can elevate a coin into conversation, into study, into fascination. Stories circulate among collectors about coins found in the most unassuming places. A forgotten jar of mixed change on a cellar shelf, an inherited album tucked away in an attic chest, a handful of coins retrieved from an old bank envelope. In those moments of discovery, when someone pulls out a coin that glows with eye appeal or unusual character, the past and present seem to meet in a single heartbeat. The emotional pull of the Susan B. Anthony dollar comes not just from its condition or rarity, but from the narrative it carries. Here was a woman born into adversity, whose voice was once unheard in the corridors of power, now commemorated on a piece of everyday money. Her presence on the coin is a testament to the progress of a nation and a tribute to resilience. Collectors often speak of the Anthony dollar with reverence because it was never fully appreciated in its own time. It was a coin ahead of its moment, misunderstood, overlooked, and underutilized. Yet that very neglect helped preserve examples for future generations, creating a quiet reservoir of possibility that only revealed its depth years later. In the modern coin market, condition and story intertwine to shape value. A 1980 D. Anthony dollar in average circulated condition is common and remains near face value for most transactions. But a mint-state survivor, brilliant, sharp, and full of life, can command attention because it tells a different story. It is proof that survival against the odds matters, that time can be resisted, and that history sometimes preserves what was once overlooked. The dream that a single coin might one day yield astonishing value, perhaps fetching sums that astonish the uninitiated, is part of the magic of collecting. It's not merely about speculation. It's about recognizing that rarity coupled with condition and story creates demand. A pristine 1980 D. Anthony dollar becomes a testament to endurance, a coin that bridges past and present, drawing admiration for both its beauty and its history. Yet even beyond monetary value, these coins remind us that history lives in the small things. Money may change hands every day, but a coin that endures untouched carries with it the echoes of decisions, moments, and lives that have passed into the background of living. It connects us to what came before and invites us to think about what endures. So when you think of the 1980 D. Susan B. Anthony dollar, think beyond metal and face value. See it as a storyteller, a keeper of memory, a survivor of decades, a bridge between eras. For every coin that was worn and forgotten, there is the rare survivor that shines like a beacon, reminding us that even the most ordinary objects can carry extraordinary meaning. For the fortunate few who find such a pristine example today, that coin represents more than a collectible. It is a reminder that value often hides in plain sight, awaiting discovery by those who look deeply and imagine beyond the surface. In the end, the true richness of these coins lies not in the numbers they might command, but in the stories they carry. Stories of perseverance, progress, and the quiet beauty of survival. Next coin. The story of the 1979 D. Susan B. Anthony dollar begins not in a museum or a vault, but in the everyday clatter of pocket change, the sound of coins dropped into cookie jars, jingled through register drawers, and forgotten in the folds of wallets. In 1979, this small coin stepped into circulation with the quiet confidence of an everyday tool, meant to pay for parking, laundry, or a bus ride. Few imagined that decades later, some examples would be treasured, studied, and even sought after with the fervor of treasure hunters. Susan B. Anthony's image on a coin was revolutionary in its own quiet way. Here was a woman whose relentless fight for women's rights had reshaped the nation. Her face on the dollar was not just decoration, it was a statement, a tribute to courage, perseverance, and the expansion of the American dream. To hold a 1979 Anthony dollar was to hold a piece of that legacy, even if most people at the time just saw it as ordinary money. The D Mint mark at the base of the coin tells us it came from the Denver Mint, a place that churned out these coins by the millions. Denver's presses worked tirelessly in 1979 to meet the nation's demand for dollar coins after paper dollars became more cumbersome and costly to produce. Yet even with millions struck, the Anthony dollar never caught on in everyday circulation the way quarters or half dollars once had. People didn't love its size, its feel, or the way it fit into wallets. So many were stashed away or simply ignored. Most 1979 D. Susan B. Anthony dollars were made of a copper-nickel-clad composition, not silver, and they looked similar to other coins of the era. That's why most were spent without a second thought. Nearly every pocket and purse saw at least one of these coins pass through it. Over time, most found their way into cash registers or dropped into change jars, their surfaces gradually worn by the friction of everyday life. Those worn coins tell a story of decades of use, the silent, uncelebrated journeys of money in motion. But among the millions of these coins were a tiny number that avoided that fate. Some were saved by people who had the instinct, even if only a whisper of suspicion, that these coins were special. Others were forgotten in jars buried on shelves, in dresser drawers left unopened for years, in wallets tucked away and lost to time. These survivors remained untouched by currency's usual abrasion, preserving a beauty that most coins lost long ago. Collectors refer to these untouched survivors as mint state examples. Coins that show no signs of wear from everyday handling. A mint state 1979 D. Susan B. Anthony dollar is not just a piece of money, it is like a photograph of a moment in time, captured the day it left the mint. Under bright light, you can see the edges crisp and sharp, the details of Anthony's portrait undiminished, the fields of the coin smooth and vibrant as if frozen just moments after creation. To the untrained eye, it may still simply appear as a dollar coin, but to someone who loves the stories behind coins, that untouched brilliance feels electric. It whispers of something rare, something that defied time's usual march. It asks questions. How did this coin escape the countless pockets and cash drawers that consumed its siblings? What journey did it take to remain pristine while so many others aged? And then there is the dream that drives collectors. The idea that hidden among everyday change might lie a coin so special it could transform someone's perspective, or even their fortune. While most 1979 D. Anthony dollars are common in circulated condition, a top-graded, mint-state example, especially one with exceptional eye appeal, can be worth significantly more than face value because it escaped where that claims the vast majority of coins. But even beyond condition, there are stories of subtle variations that capture attention. Slight differences in striking depth, faint die markers, or unusual surface characteristics are the kinds of details that spark intense study among hobbyists. What looks ordinary at a glance can reveal surprising nuances under careful inspection. These quirks are part of what makes coin collecting not just about ownership, but about discovery, curiosity, and connection. The emotional resonance of this coin also stems from the fact that Susan B. Anthony herself was a woman ahead of her time, someone who understood that change often requires persistence in the face of indifference. In a poetic twist, her coin's journey mirrors that message. Many were ignored, left in circulation, overlooked, and undervalued, yet a few survived with dignity, waiting for the right era and the right eyes to recognize their worth. Finding an exceptional 1979 D dollar today is like finding a whisper from the past that suddenly speaks with urgency. You hold it, turn it in your hands, and feel the weight not just of metal, but of decades of history, use, neglect, and preservation. It becomes more than a collectible. It becomes a conversation with time. Collectors know that most of these dollars will always be common in worn condition. That's part of reality. But that reality is also what makes the rare mint state survivors so compelling. Because they are few, because they did not endure the wear that defines most coins, they stand out. They become trophies of survival, symbols of endurance against the odds. These are the stories that animate collector passions and fuel late nights of hunting through old change. It's not just about the coin's face value or what appears stamped in metal. It's about context. It's about imagining the hands that nearly spent it, the pockets it might have slipped into, the drawers it ended up forgotten in. And then imagining the moment it was rediscovered, that first breathless second when someone realized, this isn't ordinary. This is something rare. In the collector market, coins like this are sought not just because of potential price figures, but because they carry stories. Stories of survival, of neglect, of rediscovery. They are reminders that even in the humblest of places, value can be waiting, hidden beneath layers of the everyday. A pristine 1979 D. Anthony dollar invites not just admiration, but imagination, about past hands, past lives, and future possibilities. So when you think of the 1979 D. Susan B. Anthony dollar, don't just see a dollar coin. See a symbol of perseverance, both hers and the coin's, a whisper of American history that echoes across decades. See a tiny disc that began as common currency but now carries the possibility of being extraordinary. And remember, sometimes, the smallest things carry the greatest stories, waiting for someone curious enough to listen. Next coin. The story of the 1980 P. Susan B. Anthony dollar begins not in a striking vault or a palace of treasures, but in the everyday ebb and flow of American life. In pockets, purses, glove boxes, and register trays across the country, these coins were quietly passed from hand to hand, paying for subway fares, parking meters, snacks, and errands. In 1980, most people didn't think twice when they saw this coin. It was just another form of money, part of the unnoticed machinery that kept everyday life moving. On the obverse of this coin stands Susan B. Anthony, her face calm yet resolute, her presence on currency a testament to centuries of struggle, progress, and the courage of a woman who refused to be silent. She was not a figure softened by memory. She was bold, unflinching, and unafraid to stand for what she believed in. To put her on a circulating coin was a powerful act, an acknowledgement that the nation's story was woven by individuals whose influence was once unrecognized, and whose legacy now shone in metal. The P mint mark tells us this coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, a place with roots as deep as the nation itself. Philadelphia had been producing coinage since the earliest years of the Republic, and in 1980 its presses bore down millions of pieces destined for everyday use. None of these were meant to be rare. They were intended to make commerce easier, a replacement for bulky paper dollars, and a symbol of modernity in a changing era. In 1980, America was in transition. The decade ahead would see cultural shifts, economic changes, and technological advances that would ripple through everyday life. Yet amidst all that, the Susan B. Anthony dollar moved quietly through pockets and cash drawers, often unnoticed, sometimes misunderstood, and frequently unused. Its size and design made it easy for people to confuse it with other coins, and it never quite found its place in the rhythm of everyday circulation the way smaller denominations did. For many years, most of these coins simply did their job. They were spent, worn, scratched, and eventually softened by the friction of constant handling. The eagle on the reverse, clutching its olive branches and arrows, faded with touch and time, and Anthony's face often lost its crisp detail in the rush of everyday commerce. These circulated examples tell a story of life in motion, transactions made, places visited, moments both ordinary and significant. Yet in every mass production of coins, there are those that escape the ordinary fate. Among the millions of 1980p Susan B. Anthony dollars, a rare handful were never subject to the grinding wear of circulation. Some were tucked into collections early, others slipped into drawers or jars and forgotten, and a few were preserved by people who sensed, even unknowingly, that their value might one day be different. Collectors call these pristine survivors mint state, coins that show no evidence of wear. To hold one is to hold a moment frozen in time, a coin that somehow slipped through the decades without being spent or scuffed. Under bright light, these survivors still catch the glint of mint luster, the sharp lines of Anthony's profile untouched, the fields of metal smooth and unblemished. There is something almost electric about seeing such a coin for the first time. The contrast between these brilliant survivors and the worn examples that have weathered everyday life is striking. These coins don't just represent value, they embody a kind of resilience, reminders that even in the relentless flow of time, some things endure and retain their original spark. But what makes these coins more than pretty objects? It is the stories they carry. A mint state 1980 p dollar is not just metal. It is a fragment of a moment in American history when the nation was balancing tradition and transformation. It reflects a period just before the digital revolution, before the era of credit cards and electronic wallets, when physical currency still had a tactile presence in every transaction. Beyond condition alone, the numismatic world is also fascinated by subtle variations. Minute differences that occur when millions of coins are struck. Slight irregularities in the die, tiny shifts in how the metal is pressed, almost imperceptible marks that only a trained eye can see. These variations are the fingerprints of minting, and they make each coin unique. To a collector, these are not flaws, but stories etched into metal. Imagine finding such a coin in a dusty album inherited from an older relative, or at the bottom of a long-forgotten jar of mixed change. In an instant, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. What once was overlooked becomes admired. In that moment of discovery, when a seemingly ordinary coin reveals itself to be something exceptional, the thrill is not just about potential value, but about connection, to the past, to history, and to the shared experience of time itself. This is why collectors chase these coins with such passion. Not simply for monetary value, but for the stories they tell and the surprises they hold. A mint state 1980 p Anthony dollar is not just a collectible. It is a testament to survival in a world where most coins are forgotten and worn away by use. The belief that this coin could change your fortune overnight is rooted in the real nature of how rare coins are valued, not because of metal composition, but because of condition, rarity, and demand. While an ordinary circulated example is common and worth close to face value, a truly exceptional specimen can attract strong interest among collectors who prize brilliance, sharp detail, and the sense of history that only well-preserved coins carry. Yet even beyond price, these coins remind us that value is not always obvious. Sometimes it hides in the most ordinary places. In the bottom of a purse, in a jar of spare change, in a collection forgotten for decades. The thrill is not just in finding a rare coin, but in recognizing that history lives all around us, waiting for attentive eyes and curious minds. And so the Susan B. Anthony dollar, especially the mint state survivors from 1980p, stands not only as a curiosity of currency but as a symbol of time itself. A small disc of metal, unnoticed for years, can become a conversation piece, a point of fascination, and a spark of wonder. It carries within it the echoes of everyday life long past, and the possibility that sometimes the extraordinary is hidden in the ordinary. In the end, the real story of the 1980p Susan B. Anthony dollar is not just about worth, rarity, or even potential monetary gain. It is about connection, to history, to moments we have lived, and to the simple, remarkable idea that even the smallest things can carry the deepest stories. For anyone who discovers a truly exceptional example today, this coin is more than collectible. It is a reminder that beauty, meaning, and wonder are often just beneath the surface, waiting to be found.